Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Abhinav. I'm a first year medical student in the MD PhD program, and today I want to talk a little bit about the Omicron variant of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Before I get right into it, please do consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps me out a lot. And with that being said, let's get right into it. On December 29th, 30th, somewhere around that time, there was a few papers that were released and a lot of news articles that were released around with it. And these news articles all revolved around animal studies, and the topic was the Omicron variant of SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2, as you know, COVID pandemic, yada yada yada. I hope everyone understands the severity of it. But the Omicron variant is pretty unique because this is a mutated virus of the original SARS-CoV-2 virus, and it's a more perfect virus if you think about it. Let's get right into the research that was recently published and understand why people are saying that the Omicron variant is less severe, more transmissible, and why it might be a variant that's going to stick around for a long time. So I'm at this New York Times article. And now, before I get into that, I want to stress that you should look at multiple news sources for scientific data because news sources like to idealize the results and kind of skew the wording of the results. But I found that this New York Times article, it's not perfect by any means. There are some things that I do have issues with, but it's a good idea to get a sense of what the research is talking about. They also list multiple sources, so that's a plus. So if we get into it, the title says it all. It says that Omicron is less severe and it spares the lungs, which is a huge deal because the Delta variant especially did not spare the lungs that much. The original SARS-CoV-2 virus did not really spare the lungs. When we look into what they're talking about, they say how coronavirus infects the airway. Specifically, the original coronavirus infects the lungs and the bronchial airway. But what happened is that the Omicron variant had a bunch of mutations. You can see here that there was a lot of mutations. Here we go. That there is a combination of more than 50 genetic mutations that occurred from the Delta variant to the Omicron variant. And all these mutations, a lot of them are clustered around the spike protein. You probably heard of the spike protein. Spike protein is the one that binds to the ACE2 inhibitors and allows the SARS-CoV-2 virus to enter the cells. And ACE2 receptor is commonly found in the lungs and the bronchial airway. So these mutations, now it's very important to understand, mutations does not always mean bad. In science, mutations just means a change in the genetic code. And mutations can lead to three things. It could lead to a positive thing for the organism, or virus in this case. It could be a neutral thing, it doesn't do anything, or it could be a negative thing and it actually hinders the organism or virus. So in this case, a bunch of mutations actually change the spike protein enough and other receptors around it to interact with the cells in a different way of the bronchial airway and the lungs. So what happened is that while you can't, and they do stress this, you can't predict the behavior of a virus from the mutations. At this point in scientific technology, we do have like 3D models and things like that and interactions with receptors, and that's a big field coming up. But it's not, you can't just like pull out a mutation and determine like what's going to happen to this virus. Is it going to change infectivity, et cetera, et cetera. At this point, we still have to do in vitro and in vivo studies and figure out like what's actually happening. And this usually involves animal models. And I'll get into that a little bit at the end. So when we look into this, there's a lot of things that this says. But what happens is that the Omicron variant right here is milder than Delta and the earlier versions of the virus. So all these mutations that happened on the spike protein and other receptors on the virus, it led to the virus being able to not infect the lungs as well. It infects the upper airway. So that's like your trachea, your nose and throat and all that area. So basically the upper respiratory tract before it gets into your lungs, that area is a lot more susceptible to getting infected than the lungs, which is different from what the other variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus have done. And they do say that the animals infected with the Omicron experienced much milder symptoms, and specifically there were some results in Syrian hamsters, a species known to get severely ill with all the previous versions of COVID. And that's very important because this suggests that a very susceptible organism is getting milder reactions. And now, this might not necessarily translate to humans. There's a lot of anecdotes out there where people are still suggesting that they're still seeing those ground glass opacities in lung chest x-rays. And they're still seeing a lot of lung irritability and a lot of use of respirators and things like that. So obviously these results are on animal studies that don't necessarily mean that it will happen to humans, but it does suggest why we're not seeing as deadly of an impact of this variant as it spreads throughout the world. And they do say that there's other mice and hamsters and yada yada yada. And they do have right here, it says in 12 lung samples. That's not a lot of samples. Really, if you want, there is a general rule of thumb, you need more than 30 for to create anything meaningful and statistically significant. That changes based on the context and all that. But in this case, 12 lung samples is not a lot, so we have to take that with a grain of salt. Given that, it does say that right here, coronavirus infections start in the nose or possibly the mouth and spread down the throat. Milder infections don't get much further than that. And when the normal coronavirus, like the other variants, reach the lungs, it does serious damage. This is like the normal coronavirus. And what happens is that the immune cells in the lungs can overreact. So there's a lot of immune system. A lot of the immune system is concentrated around the lungs because it is exposed to the outside world. Your GI tract and your respiratory tract are the major areas of exposure from the outside world. So that's where a lot of your immune system lives. And what happens is if there's a huge reaction from the immune system, that can lead to a cytokine storm. And that's what we see with shock when people get really severe COVID and they need to be hospitalized and treated and intubated and things like that. And what happened, and here they actually explain this protein. Lung cells carry this protein, the TMPRSS2, and that helps the virus get into the cells. But what happens is that there is an alternate route. Coronavirus can slip into cells that don't make this receptor. And the higher in the airway, the cells don't tend to carry that protein. But Omicron is found to be in that area. So it looks like they're bypassing this receptor and latching onto some other receptor, like a co-receptor or something, and invading areas above in the upper respiratory tract. And that's why we don't see that much impact into the lungs specifically, which is great because there is a big problem with lungs, as lungs carry a lot of blood. They oxygenate a lot of blood, and it's a prime area for blood clots, and that's a huge issue with COVID so far. So if that happens where we don't get that much lung damage, that's a big win. And yeah, so the Dr. Gupta speculated that the Omicron evolved into the upper airways, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And I want to go into the papers now. And I'm just going to show you the figures. I did read through the papers, but the figures are where the data is. So here's the big paper that was released, and it was released on December 29th. And it says that Omicron virus causes attenuated infection and disease in mice and hamsters. So here's some pictures of the mice lungs. This number right here ends in 617.2 is the Delta variant, and the 1.529 is the Omicron variant. And you can see they highlighted some things here. You see all this redness in the lungs, and that's all lung irritability and lung damage. So they're pointing to that, where there's a lot of things happening to the lung. And then they also have histology pictures kind of going through that. You can see how much damage there is compared to the Omicron variant in the bronchus and the alveoli. So that's very interesting. Look at this picture versus this picture. So this is all Delta, and this is all Omicron down here, which is very interesting to see. It's pretty cool in terms of an evolution aspect. The Omicron variant's not causing that much damage into the lung area, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And the reason I think it's crazy is because in terms of evolution, a virus is not technically alive. I mean, there's a lot of definitions out there. I'm not going to get into that whole argument. But the virus really just wants to infect people. They want to get into a host that will transmit as efficiently as possible so that it could spread. But importantly, it doesn't want to kill off everyone. If it kills off all of its host, then it can't really survive. It needs some like reservoir in order to maintain itself. So evolving in such a way that it doesn't cause that much damage, but it also allows infection easily, transmissible easily. That kind of puts up a great scenario of being a virus that's able to be transmitted, keep its host alive, cause enough damage through replicating a lot, and still being able to infect like the entire world. And it's possible that it might even jump hosts in the future if it mutates enough. And that's really the issue with vaccinations. Vaccinations are incredibly important because they do help you, they do help others. If you don't have a vaccine, it's been shown, study after study, that you'll get your higher likelihood of getting worse symptoms. And that could lead to hospitalizations. But if you do have a vaccine, you have antibodies there, you have memory T cells and B cells available, those will help attack the virus and cause less severe symptoms. But it also prevents the virus from possibly mutating in your body and causing these type of mutations that we see in Omicron that can lead to the spread of the entire world. And that's exactly what happened that led to Omicron. So that's why vaccines are like incredibly important. Unfortunately, the vaccine efficiency rate dropped from like 95-96% all the way down because this virus has mutated. So our immune system's not as good as recognizing it, but it still is effective. So I would urge you to get vaccinated if you can get vaccinated. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, why Omicron is not that severe compared to the Delta variant or the original coronavirus. But it is still something to be aware of because we still don't know the long-term effects of COVID in terms of like heart-related issues, possibly clots, going to the brain and things like that. We don't know the long-term effects of COVID. So if you are able to not get COVID, I hope you don't get COVID. And please do get vaccinated. Please do wear a mask. Cases are like at records right now. But it's a new year, so hopefully we can get to this new year to a great start. We can try to bring those numbers down as the days go on. But it's all up to everyone. Every single person has a part to play in this. And I told you why, because of the mutation possibility. And that's like a big part of all these variants. So yeah, that's about it. I hope you do like the video and subscribe if you really like it. I try to put out like medical videos all the time. It's really interesting stuff. There were other papers that were also released all stating the same stuff. But I didn't think I needed to like get into all that or else it would be a long video. But please do let me know if you have any questions. I would love to discuss anything about like COVID, vaccinations, immune system. It's like really cool stuff and really up my alley. So yeah, please do like and subscribe. Happy New Year and stay safe. Bye.